Well, we made it to the last section in the course, and like any good textbook, this book has thrown just about anything that they hadn't covered in the previous, 14 chapters into this last section. So I'm sure there'll be a couple of different videos to cover this. It's all about measurement. So there is a theme. I was kind of being silly when I said they just threw everything left. It's all about measuring different things. So we've measured lengths, we've measured areas, we've used areas to measure all kinds of things, surface areas and lateral areas of prisms and pyramids and cones and spheres. Now we're going to talk about volume. And then along with that goes things like mass and temperature, right? Mass is you're weighing something, temperature is how hot it is. So let's take a look first at volume. Volume is a little bit different from the other two in the types of measures we're doing. So we had linear measure. We used things like the Pythagorean theorem, the distance formula to find out how long something is. We had started at the beginning of the chapter with just take a ruler, take a hand, take a paperclip, and measure how many of them go across the surface. But then we figured out areas of two-dimensional objects. So we looked at things like areas of a polygon, areas of a circle. We extended that to surface areas, lateral surface areas, total surface areas of prisms and cylinders and pyramids and cones and spheres. Now we want to take those objects, those three-dimensional objects, and fill them with something, and that is volume. So length is measured in units, area is measured in square units, volume is a measure of how many cubic units will fit into a space. So how many cubic units will fit into a room, into a box, right? When you look at a box, it'll tell you how many square inches, square feet, square yards of material will fit inside that box. Refrigerators are measured in cubic units. Dumpsters are measured in cubic yards, right? If you ever go, like I live in a development, I go out and I put the garbage in the dumpster. It tells me how many cubic yards will fit in that dumpster, which is good. That's why I measure things before I, bring them down. But if you want to find volume, you're going to have to look at cubic units. So what is a cubic unit? Well, it's a cube that's a unit on either side, depending on what unit you're measuring things in. So in this case, let's look at a cubic foot. 1 cubic foot is a cube that is 1 foot on either side, right? 1 foot by 1 foot and then 1 foot in height. So this thing here is 1 cubic foot. Now, remember when we converted between linear units and square units, we said that like 1 square foot was not the same as 12 square inches. 1 square foot was 12 times 12, which is 144 square inches. Well, the same thing is going to happen here. If you want to measure a square foot in inches, then you're going to have 12 inches on this side. You're going to have 12 inches across the back, right? This goes this way. And then 12 inches up, right? That's the height. So your cube is 12 inches by 12 inches by 12 inches. So 1 cubic foot is actually 1,728 cubic inches. So now the unit of measure becomes a little bit more important because you would measure something in a cubic foot. That would be a lot of cubic inches, even though they're the same physical amount of space. So you can imagine, for example, measuring a box that holds like a refrigerator box or something like that, measuring that in cubic inches, you'd have a lot of cubic inches in that box. All right, how about cubic yards, right? Same idea for a cubic yard. A cubic yard is a cube that's a yard by yard by yard. Now, we're talking about a big cube, right? Put your hands out. A yard is 36 inches. 36 by 36 by 36. That's a big measure, and you want to find out how many of them will fill up the space. So how many cubic yards will fill up the room. One reason you might be interested in that is airflow, right? If you buy an air conditioner, you buy an central HVAC system, and you want to know how much air that thing can move, well, if you don't buy a big enough unit, then it's not going to be enough to move that air in that space. Of course, if you buy one that's too big, you're going to have spent way too much money on something that's not efficient. All right, the other version is take that same cubic yard and measure in feet, 3 feet by 3 feet by 3 feet. 3 times 3 is 9 times 3 is 27. So 1 cubic yard is the equivalent of 27 cubic feet. It'll take 27 of these 1 cubic foot regions, right? Here's a cubic foot, there's a cubic foot, and of course they extend back. It'll take 27 of those little cubic foot regions to fill a cubic yard. All right. How about metric? Metric is the same deal, right? Except this time we're only multiplying by powers of 10 because that's how we go back and forth. So if we've got a cubic meter is something that's a meter by a meter by a meter, so roughly a cubic yard. Suppose I wanted to convert that into cubic centimeters. Well, 1 cubic meter is the equivalent of 100, 1 meter is the equivalent of 100 centimeters. So now you've got a cube that's 100 centimeters by 100 centimeters by 100 centimeters. So 1 cubic meter is 1,000,000 cubic centimeters. Okay, and the one down the bottom just deals with decimeters. I'm not going to worry about that. But up here, that's the more important one, a cubic meter versus a cubic centimeter. So these powers of 10 apply it to all three sides, and since we had 2 zeros here, 2 zeros there, 2 zeros there, that's how we end up with 6 in the answer. All right, how about liters? Right, you buy a liter of, or 2-liter bottle of soda. A liter is a measure of volume. Right? It's not a measure of mass. It's not an area. It's a measure of volume. So the key is that a liter is 1,000 cubic centimeters. In general, 1 milliliter is 1 cubic centimeter. So 1 milliliter is 1 cubic centimeter. So that means that 1,000 milliliters is 1,000 cubic centimeters. So I know you don't think of the volume of that bottle of soda, but really what you're doing by buying a 2-liter bottle of soda is you're buying something that is 2,000 cubic centimeters of whatever your favorite soda is. All right, the liters and the milliliters go back and forth. So if a liter is 1,000 milliliters, it works the other way too, that the smaller unit, the milliliter, is 1/1000th of the liter. All right, so how do you convert back and forth between the two of them? Well, 27 liters, that's a lot, right? That's a big measure. If 1 liter is 1,000 milliliters, if you've got 27 liters, then 27 liters is 27,000 milliliters. And another way to think of that is 27,000 cubic centimeters, because 1 cubic centimeter is 1 milliliter. All right, this one goes in the other direction, 362 milliliters. So now this is a small measure. This is a much larger measure. So to go from one to the other, you would divide. So you would take 362 milliliters, divide it by 1,000 milliliters in a liter, and you would end up with 0.362 liters, right? 362 milliliters is not even, is just a little bit more really than a third of a liter. All right, how about 3 milliliters? Remember we said that a milliliter is the equivalent of a cubic centimeter? So 3 milliliters should be 3 cubic centimeters. All right, how about cubic meters versus liters? Right? If I had 1 cubic meter, how does that compare to a liter? Well, it turns out that 1 cubic meter is 1,000 liters. That's a lot of liters, all right? So 3 cubic meters would be 3,000 liters. And I think if I push the button, it's just going to come up with the answers. Oh, look at that. I got them right. All right, converting between different types of measures. This is where life gets a little tricky, but these are the basic conversions, right? Cubic inches, cubic feet, and cubic yards, we already went through those. Down the bottom is where the volume equivalents are, and you might need this for one of the labs. A gallon is the equivalent of 231 cubic inches. So you buy a gallon of gas, you're filling up a space in your gas tank that is 231 of those little cubic inches. And then the other thing is between quarts and gallons, right? If you have 1 gallon, a gallon is 4 quarts. So that means that half a gallon is the equivalent of 2 quarts. And if you wanted to go deeper, you could get into pints and cups and things like that. But I think we're going to try to keep things somewhat simple here. All right. I'm going to do another one with the volumes of these different types of objects because that one could go a little bit long.